Thank you, everyone, for joining us for another Mysterious Galaxy virtual and in-store event. Tonight, we have joined with us Daniel Jose Older. He is the New York Times bestselling author and story architect. He has published 14 novels and numerous short stories and essays, and is a regular comics writer for Star Wars, The High Republic Adventures, and Marvel. Excuse me, I need my water. Of course, joined with us as conversation partner, we have Tiffie Starchild, a content creator, host, gamer, and performer who is wildly passionate about nerd fandom culture. You can find her video editorials and photo portfolios across all social media platforms using her handle at Tiffie Starchild. Yep. But today, we are here tonight for Daniel's latest novel, Ballad and Dagger, an Outlaw Stars novel. Everyone, let's give it for him.
As I take the microphone, and you are the one that ended up speaking first anyway.
I just don't. You know mine.
Well, hi, everybody. Welcome. Thank you so much for being here. And hi, everyone that's tuning in virtually. Like I said, my name is Tiffie. I am so pleased to be sitting here with you, Daniel. And actually, I was going to read your bio. So now that that's been taken care of. So I know we can read this. Ballad and Dagger. What I will do is, since we are here, you have a wide breadth of work. You work with Disney for Marvel and Star Wars. And this is your personal novel world that you built. And that's the book that we're going to discuss. So what I want to do is actually open up with reading you the inside cover, just so if you haven't had a chance, you know what we're going to be diving into, because I think that it's worth it. So, Ballad and Dagger, an Outlaw Saints novel. Almost 16 years ago, Mattos' island homeland disappeared into the sea. Weary and hopeless, the survivors of San Madrigal escaped to New York, while the rest of his tight-knit Brooklyn diaspora community dreams of someday finding a way back home. Mateo, now a high school junior and piano prodigy, living with his two aunts, one who's alive, the other not so much, is focused on one thing: getting the attention of locally grown music legend Jabal. Mateo finally gets his chance on the night of the Grand Fete. I said that right? An annual party celebrating the blended culture of pirates, Santeros, and Sephardim. Thank you. I meant to ask you about that one too. That created San Madrigal all those centuries ago. But the evil that sank their island has finally caught up with them. And I told y'all I'm getting used to my glasses. I did not know that they could hit a microphone, and now I know. Putting that away for later. But the evil that sank their island has finally caught up with them, and on the night of the celebration, Mateo's life is forever changed when he witnesses a brutal murder committed by a person he thought he knew. Suddenly, Mateo is thrust into an ancient battle that spans years and sees as deadly secrets unravel. Mateo awakens a power within himself, a power that not only links him to the killer, but could also hold the key to unlocking the dark mystery behind their lost homeland. Yes. Don't say that. It's not messed up.
That was good.
Thank you.
Pronounced the hell out of it.
I was at home practicing, and Encanto just came out too from Disney, so I was like, Madrigal. I have so much practice doing that one specifically.
True.
So the question that you get often,
Right.
What inspired this? What inspired this?
I'm gonna pause though because I want to read a little bit first.
You want to read first?
Yeah. You want me to read after?
I want you to read whenever spirit tells you to read.
I started reading, but
Then I want you to start with reading.
Okay, I'll start reading, but I'm thinking about that question while I read, because like I said, I try to answer it differently every time, and we'll see what happens. But anyway, thank you for being here. Give it up, please, for Tiffie Starchild. She is amazing. I must say, the copywriter's really the thing with that. I've read it, but it sounds good it's a whole nother level of good. I didn't write that, no. I checked it over, and I was like, yeah, that's good. But, they killed it. All right, so now you know the basic premise. We're going to jump into chapter 1, where we find Mateo walking through the streets of Brooklyn in his neighborhood to head to the Grand Fete, where his life will change forever, obviously. San Madrigal sings and saunters and simmers through these Brooklyn streets. I can feel that place rattling and clacking all around me as I cross Fulton and head toward Tolo's Club. A tinny, old-timey shanty streams out of Barbudo's barbershop, and the clack of the clave tack-tacks along beneath it in a series of off-kilter exclamation points, while the accordions wail out the harmonies. A rumba sounds from a rooftop nearby, the breezy lows and highs of those congas voices blending with acoustic guitars, and a hoarse wail over the muddled traffic. I take it all in as I stroll, and a melody forms, just like it always does. Some kind of rising, falling blend of these different worlds that smashed together so long ago, made us what we are, and led us to this weird exile world 1,000 miles away. The melody is just getting going when I stop in my tracks, and everything seems to snap into silence around me. Tolo's Club is just ahead across the next street. It's all decked out in Christmas lights and tacky pirate-themed decorations, and the words San Madrigal Grand Fete tonight proclaim what's happening across a bright marquee. As lit up as the event hall is, though, it's the figure standing in the alley behind it who stops me cold. He is tall and bulky, and the orange streetlights glint off the face shield of his helmet. Trucks, which means that Jerval is somewhere nearby. Look, I'm not good at the whole talking to people thing. Just give me a keyboard to play, you know? But I am especially not good at talking to people I look up to. Usually, all the words I've planned out and practiced mysteriously evaporate the second I open my mouth. So I just end up making gurgling noises instead, and then puking. Just kidding, usually. The point is, if I could get the awkward talking to Jerval part out of the way before the performance, I would actually enjoy the night instead of stressing out, and I would play better. And then I would definitely get hired as his new pianist and tour the world. So I take one step into the street and open my mouth to say, hey, or more realistically, to just gurgle, when something moves through the shadows toward Trucks. It's so fast, I just catch a flicker against the darkness as the slight form launches into the air. I say, my eyes wide, and Trucks looks up at me, then spins suddenly, swings one burly arm out, and smashes the figure hurtling at him, who appears to be a girl about my age. I can't make out her face as she grunts and lands in the shadows. It all happens so fast, and Trucks' bulky frame blocks my view. I'm not sure whether to run toward them or away. None of this makes sense. She's already leapt back up to her feet as he swings again, this time with one of those extendable batons that dudes like Trucks buy online to feel more like cops. The girl slides nimbly out of the way and then back. I hear the sharp thunks of fists finding their mark, and Trucks stumbles back a step, arms flailing. It all seems to slow as a rare, trembly music opens up inside me. Songs, they just come when they feel like it. There's no logic to it. This music, the music of their fight, is like nothing I've ever heard. Shrill and melodic, with a splatter of snare hits beneath and a thunderous bellow throughout. She's on him in seconds, climbing his body like a tree. Then Trucks lets out a guttural kind of burp that's cut off suddenly and becomes more of a whistle. He drops to his knees and keels forward, cracking his face shield on the pavement. He's dead. He's definitely dead. She stands over him, panting, a blade in one hand. As she looks down at what she's done, her slim shoulders rise and fall. Her thick red hair is pulled back in two afro puffs, and her face is a few shades darker than mine. Above her round glasses, her brow is creased with fury. I know her. That is Chela Hidalgo. I grew up with Chela. She's Rabbi Hidalgo's daughter and Tola Baracasa's cousin. We don't know each other that well because she's super quiet and minds her business even more than I do. Well, I thought she did anyway. She just murdered a man right in front of my eyes. And then, because I'm the biggest schmo in the universe, and because, let's be honest, I'm in shock, I go, I don't even know what that's supposed to mean. It's just a useless sound that I let escape from my useless mouth, which is hanging open uselessly. Now we're staring at each other 10 feet apart with a dead body between us. She's still out of breath, but her expression is firm, not surprised. It says, I will kill again if I have to. And mine probably says about what I'm thinking. Oh my God, oh my God, oh my God, oh my God, what did I just see? Oh my God, help! She takes one step toward me, her eyes narrowing, And then a strange blue light erupts in the air like a slow-mo lightning flash. And suddenly, standing between us is a shimmering form in a hooded robe, looking like death himself. Both Chayla and I take a step back, our mouths open, our faces lit with that blue glow. I can't see under the hood. I'm not sure who to be more afraid of. And I don't have time to decide, because with a flash and fizzle, the figure vanishes. I wouldn't believe it really happened, except Chayla clearly saw it too. Very slowly, very deliberately, she looks at me. Then she turns and walks away, vanishing like a phantom into the shadows of the alley. As soon as she's gone, I lean over and puke my guts out. Thank you. Thank you. Back to you.
Yeah, so forget my other question. I don't want to answer that yet. Because one of the things that struck me, thank you for that reading, and it was excellent hearing it in your voice. But speaking of voices, Mateo is so relatable. It's giving TikTok generation, like in the best way. How much of that is your voice, and how much of that did you create for Mateo?
It's like 90% me. It's a lot of me, but it's like me when I was like in my teens and 20s, making the worst possible decisions of life to write the best possible books later is the best way to look at it, I think. But I did I think of it as like a gift that I gave myself when I was younger to the me now, is that I journaled a lot as a teenager. And I did it on the computer, which most people don't do. And they made fun of me for it. And I was like, oh, but you have to do it with like a quill pen and a beautiful bound book and all that other stuff. And I get that. But for whatever reason, I just started doing it on the computer, and it just became like this home to me. Like writing on the computer was just like, it was a friend. So it wasn't like just homework assignments or just other things on deadline or whatever. Like it just really became that, and it stayed that way. Way later, when I became a writer, it felt like, sitting in front of the blank screen, it still feels like home. It feels like a place I can, unburden myself and tell the truth. And I think that led to Mateo's voice very clearly, to just me be able to be like, okay, this is what's going on. And then I just tell a story around that.
Do you relate more to this character than any of the other characters that you've written?
I do. Like we're demographically very similar, and he's a better piano player than me. He's taller than me, and other than that, he is. It's true. I have to admit it. It's like every character, especially every main character, you gift them things of yourself. Like for Sierra Santiago and Shadow Shaper, like I gave her my love of drawing when I was a kid. And so that became like who she was, and I gave Mateo my love of music, but also all of my own neuroses and insecurities and every other problem too.
Okay. I'm so happy that you brought up music. So I was going to ask what your background with music is. I come from a musical family. I'm pointing to my mommy, but from a very musical family. But even still, there's a lot I don't understand about music. I don't read music. I know this note goes up, this note goes down, and I'm gonna hold this one for 4 counts. That's about as much as I can do.
That's a lot. That's not enough.
But so the way that Mateo, you describe music, the way that you describe that being his home, tell me about your connection with music, because that spoke strongly to me, because it was the way that you described him playing music. I couldn't hear it, but I could feel it. I didn't need to know the sound because I felt exactly what you were trying to describe. And I kind of want to know a little bit more about that.
That's great. First of all, thank you. I'm glad to hear it, because that's what I was going for. I was like, you can't make people hear things, and I often think about that because I'm so inspired by music and I love it so deeply. Sometimes I'll hear a song and I'll be like, ooh, could I write like what this song, could I do with words what this song does with notes? And the answer is no, absolutely not. You cannot do that. but you can try and fail, and in failing, do something totally new that you would never have done. And that's kind of like my philosophy of writing, in a way, of like prose, is that like it is a kind of a glorious failure no matter what, but it's amazing. Like you go through this process that takes you to places you wouldn't have gone. And I do have music in my background. I also can't sight read. Like I understand music in a lot of ways, But yeah, overrated. I have a terrible singing voice and no kind of ear. I just love music deeply, and I do understand like a certain amount of theory, enough to kind of like give it to Mateo and let him seem like he knows more.
Right.
So that works. But it's also just about loving it and him seeing the world through it. That's very true to me. Like the way that it changes a moment. You know, the way it changes your life, which is made up of moments, the way it can save your life. Like all those are just experiences that I know from my own life that I was like, this is for Mateo.
Okay. Yeah, the way that you had it, I was like, man, this is a musician and an author, because it was in depth. It was very enjoyable. We are knocking these questions out. Some of them you just answered. So much of yourself is in Mateo. When you were his age, because as we know, we work in very nerdy spaces. When you were his age, what type of media influenced you the most between comic books or TV shows, movies? What got you going in that regard?
That's a really good question. I was all over the map in the best way, and I support people being all over the map for that very reason. When I was a little younger than him, it was like Greek mythology and politics. Like literally Watergate, which is weird because I was born in '80, well after Watergate happened. But for some reason, I was obsessed with Watergate as a kid. I blame my mom in the best way, and because she's a politics nerd. So I just had all these like really different things going on. I loved, like Tolkien and Star Wars, of course. Like, let me not forget Star Wars. Like that is probably the biggest single influence on me in terms of like my overall aesthetic. Like Return of the Jedi was the first movie I saw in the movie theater. Wow. Totally changed my life. I was 3 and I kept going back for more. We had all the action figures. That's probably where I started storytelling in the first, you know what I mean? And so certainly that, all those pieces. And then more Mateo's age, man, high school, what was I thinking in? I don't know. A good amount of Shakespeare, actually. I really have always loved Shakespeare. And I had at that point kind of like starting to veer away from like some of the nerdier stuff, in part because I was like, where are we in this equation? You know what I mean? Especially this is the 80s and 90s, like where were we then? Thanks, Mom. That's all right. And that turned me off. Like I didn't have the language or the analysis for it, but I knew like something was missing, and it was us. Like there weren't black and brown kids in the books that I loved, and like eventually that hurt my feelings. It's like you love a genre, it doesn't love you back. What do you do with that? So what I did with it eventually, and especially in my later teens and in college, was like try to track down people who would tell me the truth about the world. Like, Bell Hooks, James Baldwin, Eduardo Galeano, Arundhati Roy, like these great truth tellers. But I was still missing like the fantasy, because that's also who I am. And then I came back around to it because my roommate after college was a Potterhead. And I was like, okay, this is cool, but it's still a little white dude saving the world. Right. With little white dude mythologies, and like, we've just done that so many times. And on the other hand, like I enjoyed it, never mind, now she's a transphobe, so we're not even dealing with her. But I wanted something for us, for all the different us's that exist. And so that's really where a lot of my like writing came from. It's like a counter narrative to the same old story.
That was one of the things I loved seeing in the book, when you were described skin tone and body shape. It's the same thing growing up as a little brown girl. I didn't see myself represented. I only had Storm from the X-Men and Princess Jasmine. And that was as close as we can get, as far as Disney goes and seeing representation. So, but I'm still waiting in a lot of ways to be described in my fullness. I'm thick, and you don't get that in representation anywhere, along with not seeing myself, my cult represented. And it was one of the things I loved right away reading in your book, when you, with Tia Lucia, describing her and her connection to her culture and just her body as well. I'm just like, oh, we mean this. When you described Shayla's red hair and her skin a couple shades darker than Mateo, I was like, oh, wait a minute, which was a surprise because they actually didn't send me the book until today.
Stop.
I will not stop. No, but they sent a PDF file. So I've been reading on my phone, and I discovered I could highlight. I felt very powerful. But when I actually received the book itself, and I had seen the cover, of course, and the promotional material, it is different. Y'all got your book in your hands. This is, I don't know if you had a chance to even just flip through it. If you see the map here of San Madrigal, is beautiful. I was like, wait a minute, we have illustrations, but each page and the blending of cultures that make up these people, the pirates, I feel like this is a pirate book. It gives pirate, and that kind of, I don't know how it gives pirate. It does.
No, that's perfect. That's new blurb. It gives pirate.
That's new blurb, or the blurb. Oh, yes, I got one. It gives pirate. I'm still learning about the author world. So how did that come to be? My understanding, I'm born and raised San Diego. My father is from Brooklyn, and this story takes place in Brooklyn. And my understanding, there is a deep Hispanic culture and Jewish culture, and we see that represented, and then the pirates as well. How easy was it for you to bring those three together? Is it because those cultures coexist in New York that way, or the pirates probably not, but
it's actually because they coexist in me.
Oh.
And so in that sense, it was pretty easy. I was raised Jewish and Catholic.
Okay.
Obviously, I'm a pirate. And, so it's just like, it's different parts of me. Now, within that, there's complexity, right? And I think that's also where a lot of these conversations, because we're finally having them after so long, that we lose so much of the nuance to them. Like, this is a whole other conversation anyway, but like, when we say own voices, like, that's a great term. It's important because we need to talk about people writing their own stories, but also like within one culture, there's so much, hierarchy and nuance and complexity that we never get to because we're so busy just being like, we just need some representation, please.
Right.
So it's like, I feel like we're getting there. But this is certainly like one way for me to try to get into that depth and and wrestle with it, in a real way, questions of identity and culture and power and privilege, but in the space of a fantasy novel, right? Like it's not an essay. And so it has to be wrapped around a narrative that feels true and exciting and has monsters and everything else. So that was it. But on a basic level too, this book had a really wild and winding journey to existence. It started years and years ago. This game company came to me and they were doing interactive books. And I was like, oh, this sounds really cool. And they asked me for a pitch. And at that point, I had a couple books out and I've always really excited about nerd culture and stuff. And I was like, this is great. So I put together this pitch. And pitch is like just the basic semblance of a story, the idea of the world, maybe a chapter, that's it. And it was called Mattos Monster Murker.
Oh,
yeah.
Monster Murker.
Monster Murker. It was about this kid Mateo who goes around Brooklyn murking monsters. Super fun. Like this, like for a younger audience, basically. And they were like, no, absolutely not. What? But it's so cool.
It's very cool.
Yeah, but not cool enough, which is fine. It worked out. Look, they got us here. Now, fast forward a couple of years, DC Comics came to me, who you may have heard of. And they were like, hey, do you want to write us a story, a young adult story for comics? And I was like, oh, definitely, absolutely. I will do that. So I came up with this whole new superhero named Night Song. And she's a teenage girl who goes out at night and heals her community members who are in an immigrant community who are being beat up by this masked marauder that thinks he's a bat.
Okay.
So Batman was the bad guy. So DC was like, me too, but DC didn't. So they were like, no, absolutely not. And I was like, what? I knew it was a long shot. And they were nice about it. Don't get me wrong, but no. So I was like, all right, fine. You put those things in the file for later. And that's what happened. And Rick has had this imprint for a while, Rick Riordan, and he's amazing, obviously. And as soon as it came out, I really wanted to work on it or do a book for it. The wild part about that, too, is that part of the imprint came out of Rick reading Shadow Shaper. And being like, this is such a cool book. And his editor, Stephanie, who's my editor now, being like, we should like put out books like this, just so cool. So it's kind of a full circle moment. And and so I was like, all right, I pitched him this middle grade book called Mattos Monster Murker about this kid named Mateo who runs around Brooklyn marking monsters and And he was like, cool, but we're doing YA now. And I was like, oh, they were like, so do you want to do it as a YA? And to be fair, they were spot on with that because even in that version, Mateo was like playing piano at like all night clubs and like had a crush on the waitress and everything else. And it was like, this is a very YA vibe, So I was like, all right. And in the process of being like, I'm going to take this book for 8 to 12-year-olds and turn it into a book for 13 to 18-year-olds, I realized like I was really gonna have to go even further with this mythology. Originally, it was mostly just the Santeria, which is the culture that I'm an initiated priest in, and so it's a culture that I'm part of, and I feel really comfortable with. And I still was like, it doesn't quite feel right to put the spirits right on the page, even though they're spirits that like I'm a part of. And so I knew to really be able to like play within this world and to let my imagination do all the things it needed to do to make this story work, I needed to come up with new gods and monsters. And that required, but I still wanted it to be very grounded and have Orisha philosophy in it and like have Judaism and all these other things. So that basically ended with this new island, San Madrigal, and all these different cultures smashing together, and then them coming up with new gods and saints and demons and everything else and bringing them to Brooklyn.
Okay. Thank you for answering that. Oh shoot, that was so good. It made me forget my new question. My next question. It was about that. Oh yeah. So in terms of creating this completely original world with these original gods and monsters, how different is that, or which one is more difficult? This, where you have almost complete creative control, or working within the confines of Disney and Marvel and Star Wars?
What's nice actually is that they balance each other out. Okay. So like Star Wars, especially right now with the High Republic, like it's such a team effort, and it's really this process, almost like a writer's room for a TV show, where we sit around and break story and like figure out the big beats together, and then kind of break off and do our smaller things and come back together. And that's like beautiful. Like that's an amazing process, and it kind of breaks down the stereotype of like the lonely writer in the cabin, just drinking, like, which is terrible and not true, but also like, there's a danger to that. And I love like the reality that writing is a team effort no matter what. Even if it's not with an actual team like Star Wars, like you're always giving it to your agent, to your editor, to the people who put the book together, to the incredible cover artists, like all that. So yeah, with Star Wars, yes, like it is confined, and there are certain things that we have to really like, we have to play with each other, and play by each other's rules to some extent, and play by George Lucas's rules too. And so that's challenging, but in an awesome way. Like, how like certain being confined, it's almost like the way Twitter and TikTok, I think they get so much more creativity out of people because there's a limit, instead of it just being like YouTube where you can go on forever. You know what I mean? Like there's a certain like power that comes from being, I don't want to say being confined, but having certain kind of regulations. The way like poetry, like the form will change the poem, or with songwriting, or with comics, you have 20 pages and you've got to fit that story in there and make it work. So that's, there's a joy to that, and there's an excitement and a challenge, but then it's also nice to be able to break off that and be like, okay, this is all mine.
We're freestyling,
just running like amok in the streets of Brooklyn and doing whatever we want. And so it's balance.
Okay. I like the balance. And when writing for young adults, do you find it difficult to bring in subjects like colorism? Because that is addressed in the book and within the community. Like, and as you said, even when we have representation, there are so many different facets of that gem. Not one Black person can write and tell all about the Black experience and things like that. Was that difficult, or were there certain limitations even on you introducing that into a young adult novel?
I think the challenge is always like how you make it work with story, right? Because like I could write an essay about it, and I talk about it with everyone all the time, like in our circles. But to make it fit into story and not just feel like you're throwing it in there, that's really where it has to click. And that is hard, but it's so worth it. I was thinking back in Shadow Shaper, there's a scene where Sierra has like that racist aunt that everybody has, like so many people, especially in like Latino. Well, I thought it was just a Latino problem. I knew better, but I was also like, there's a thing that some like Latino parents say where they're like, don't date anybody darker than the bottom of your foot. Right. Not my parents, thank God. But it's a thing. Like the racist Latina aunt is a thing. And so I wrote her into the book, and it, it coincides with the moment when Sierra has a crush on someone, and it kind of, what I didn't expect was that like people from literally all over this planet were like, oh man, I heard that exact same phrase. People from Asia, people from Africa, like people all over. And it just how deep anti-Blackness is, like just how global it is. That really shook me, but it also was very like, I'm really glad I put that in there, and especially like as a Latino writer, as a not Black Latino writer who was brown but light, like all of those things, it makes it very easy for me to not talk about it. It's always easier for people of privilege to not talk about Fight Club and like just be like, hey, cool, everything's great. We're one big happy Latino family and everybody loves each other. And there's the cute abuela and the little mariposas and like all that BS. And like, that's a lie. Like there is a beauty to us. There is a way that we get along. And there's a lot of ways we don't. And it's incumbent, I think, on those of us particularly who are empowered by the disagreements to call them out and be real about them. But then again, we still have to make it work in story. It doesn't work if it's just a random call out and like people just, so that's kind of what I was like bringing to it and like what I was trying to think through and how I was doing my best to make it work.
I think that you did a great job of making it work. And I was surprised because I grew up reading Harry Potter and those type of young adult novels. And sometimes you don't realize what you're missing in those stories until you see it. I don't read those novels. I don't take much time for reading fiction much anymore, which by the way is very much changed after this experience. I'm like, let me get back into reading. Let me get back into my nerdy roots. Yeah. So thank you for that. It's just like, yeah. So seeing that was shocking, almost as surprising as the murder that you, from the excerpt that you read for us, which happens fairly early in the story. That was surprising, but so was just literally seeing the word slavery in there. I was like, whoa, it's the big S word that's in here. And also colorism. It's just surprising because it's so hush hush. Right. We don't like to talk about it because it makes some people so uncomfortable. Right. So I appreciate what you did in bringing that here.
I'm really glad to hear that hit home because that was the hardest part in a lot of ways, like for those challenges that I explained. I also feel like young people in this generation particularly like are so much more talkative about this stuff and like ready to face it head on than I know like in my generation. It was like still just really taboo. People would just say it quietly, and like dealing with race was just this like in a lot of ways, and obviously that's just my own experience. But I think also in just mainstream conversations, right? Like the idea of having young adult literature confront it head on, whether it's fantasy or not, and all these different great books that are coming out, like that was unheard of, right? But young people are dealing with it. They were dealing with it back then, but they had to do it so much more quietly, and like they're dealing with it now and they're so loud about it. I mean, it's amazing, and I'm really inspired by that. And I'm just so happy that like I can write books for a generation of people that are already talking about it and dealing with it and very radical, like from jump, so that and so that it makes sense for Mateo to be like, the bar is so low when we're just like, hey, we didn't have slavery. Right. Like, wow, like congratulations, right. Like, do you want a cookie? And for him to have that take on it, that's because of the way young people are right now. Like that wouldn't have felt true, a generation back, I think.
I had to ask myself when I was reading it, not to be in your business, but I was like, how old is Daniel? And that's only because you're so good at writing from a young person's perspective. Like I said, it felt like I was dealing directly with Gen Z and TikTok. If you're familiar and on those apps, like you said, they are very vocal. They are loud. I am afraid to breathe on Beyonce's internet because if I mess up, they're gonna find it. Like, and they will let you know. They will let you know.
Very often compassionately too, which I think is amazing. I'm 42, by the way, but that's amazing to hear. I'm glad I hit that too. But yeah, I just think like that's something we're seeing too, and like it gets more doing this, but people reduce it to like cancel culture, all these other things that aren't really true. When you look at how, first of all, what an act of compassion it is to tell someone when they messed up. That's truly a gift, like sometimes it's ugly, absolutely, and it hurts people's feelings for sure. But truly, like if I don't mess with you at all, then you're not going to hear from me how you messed up. You're just not going to hear from me.
Exactly.
Period. Yeah. We're not cool. But if you messed up and I care about you, then I'm going to let you know because I love you, and that's truly like, that's a beloved community. But I think it's hurt people's feelings and they're coming from a place of power and discomfort. And so they've twisted that into this thing that is like, but you're making me uncomfortable and I'm being canceled, whatever. Like, but I'm also a millionaire, all these things. And I just think like, that's something else that I really admire about the young people in this generation coming up right now is that they will have that conversation with you, even though it's going to hurt. It's going to be uncomfortable, but that is love.
I respect that. My friends that call me out and let me know, those are the ones that I know are real. It's the ones that are keep smiling. And I'm just like, but I know something's wrong. I feel the difference. I'm a Pisces. I know when it feels different in here. How did we know? What's that mean?
You have a butterfly there.
That's true. That's very, very true.
I'm a Capricorn.
Are you a Capricorn? Capricorns are good people. Yeah. Let me see. Wow, we've gotten through so much of these. What do you want the readers to feel or walk away with after they finish reading this first book of Matteo's story?
That's a good question. And I've been asked it before, and I never know what the answer is. I have a bunch of answers. It's a really good question. For me, like, I guess I really want them to feel a sense of freedom, like reading it, like just like to realize, like, we don't have to be beholden to all of those terrible lies that we were raised on. We don't have to believe it. We don't have to live it. We can make a new mythology. We can make a new language. Like, we can do this new. And no, like, we haven't torn down the system or started brand new. That's true. But in the way that we deal with each other, we can do whatever we want. And we can do it with compassion and with love and with critique. And we don't have to, like, carry that weight of all the mistakes people before us made. I really want them to walk away and just feel like my story matters so much. And because it's not the same old story that we've heard over and over. Instead of feeling like, oh, my story is different from some of the others, or from what I see in the media, and so it doesn't matter as much. I want them to feel the opposite, and then go write their story.
Thank you. Like, I'm fighting tears, and that is no, don't, because that is, I put eyelashes on for this. I'm not gonna cry tonight, my guy.
Astrologically normal.
You get it. I say that about Pisces, and people are like, that's not true. And I'm like, it is. Pisces like to cry. But with this book, and I think I put it on Instagram, you made me cry my own tears.
What part?
That's the thing. It wasn't, with no spoilers, it was not a specific part. Actually, let me switch over, because in my highlighting of the book, there was something that I highlighted.
Okay.
Silly me. I definitely should have just taken a screenshot of it. Let me see. Give me 1 second while I find it. I highlighted it in purple, so it should stand out pretty quickly. Oh, one thing I highlighted. I just play my music, drink lots of water, and mind my business. I was like, bars. Let's go. That's all I'm trying to do.
Young legend.
A young legend. Not all the time, though. I be in the TikTok comments. So I mind my business, like, close. Oh my gosh. Do you mind if I just want to make sure there are no spoilers.
No, go ahead.
Oh, okay. During our brief stints at home, they took me around to different music masters in Little Madrigal. And then everything really started clicking. All those winding, overlapping Sephardi melodies, that mix of joy, of sorrow, calling out to God, aching for a lost homeland. The singular, hilarious tragedy of the shanties, so many voices on top of each other, rattling along beneath the relentless stomp forward, the call and response, praise songs for each spirit over the rumbling bata drums. It never felt like I was learning something new, just finding out the names of harmonies I made friends with long before. My God, that had me in tears. And that was just one of them. It was the way that specifically, it never felt like I was learning something new, just finding out the names of harmonies I'd made friends with long before. I feel like when people are aligned with what they are supposed to do, which is so much of what Matteo's journey is, things just click. Things, you just feel it inside. It's that feeling inside of you that is propelling you forward into your destiny. If that word is too big, it's where you're supposed to go, where you're supposed to be. I'm a strong believer in that. And the way that sentence summed that up so well, just like relinking with your destiny and being aligned with that. I thought that was beautiful. That was beautiful. Yeah.
That's so great to hear, because usually it's like plot points that make people cry, right? Like, there's plenty of those in this book. So I'm glad that actually, like, the work, just the description of Mattos Passion, like, is what hit. That's amazing.
Yeah. And I'm looking at the time. Are we moving towards question time? We have more?
I think, unless you have some more, I think we can definitely go into audience questions.
I think, let me see here. Did you have it? Yeah.
The audience wants to.
Yeah, I really want to get to the audience. Let me see. I made a Google document with my questions because I'm organized. That is not a Pisces trait. Let me see. Oh, because you have become a father, and you showed me your beautiful baby. So how has becoming a father changed your writing, or has it changed how you develop these characters or how you tell these stories at all?
It definitely has on a basic level. Like I already thought of myself as a pretty nimble writer in the sense of like I get the words in when I can and my best or whatever. Because I started writing literally in the back of an ambulance. Like it was one of the places that I was just trying to get chapters in when I was just starting out because I was a paramedic, and it would be between heart attacks and gunshots, literally. And so you have to be able to put stuff down and pick it back up quickly. In that, however, nothing really prepares you for being a father, first of all, for like parenthood in general. And second of all, nothing can prepare you for like just the complete chaos of a baby in the house and like what that does to time and everything else. And then so now it's like, thank God it's not between heart attacks and gunshot wounds, but it is changing diapers, right? And like, random wake ups in the middle of the night and all that other stuff. So I've had to learn out of necessity to adjust my schedule accordingly to a non-schedule, like to a schedule ruled only by the chaos god that is a baby, which is awesome. Like it's totally worth it. Like it's hard, it's worth it. And that's what it is. On a deeper level, what was wild to me was discovering after the fact that I'd been processing parenthood all in the run up to in most of my High Republic work. Like all of that writing, looking back on it, and it was perfect because you write it months before it comes out, especially with comics. So it would drop like around when Tito was born, and it would be all this stuff of like Jedi and their Padawans, and these questions of just what it means to love and to let go and to hold tight to someone, but also have to like release them into the universe in different ways, and not because they're dead, but because they're alive, and you have to let go. And that's the reality of parenting. That's the deepest lesson of parenting. I think we're always learning. Like there isn't like a set point where we learned it. But I feel like that's what the Jedi were kind of trying to teach me through me writing them, and their Padawans were teaching them that too. And that's the ongoing lesson. That's what Tito teaches me. It's like that I have to love him and I also have to let him go. And that's hard, but it's beautiful. That's the reality.
Yeah. Oh no, not me looking at my mom with tears in my eyes. and I will say, when you said in the back of the paramedic, I didn't catch that you were the. I was like, man, he is dedicated on his way. Medical emergency. No, I must write.
I forget to tell people that. So yes,
but it's okay. No, it adds a little spice.
It's between calls. Yes.
Oh, perfect. Well, those are all the questions I have. I do appreciate you chatting with me. So yeah. Thank you.
Yeah, let's talk to the audience.
Yeah, question here.
Hey, Daniel. Tiffie.
Hey.
Tiffany.
Tiffie.
So, I saw that you currently live in New Orleans. Does that affect your writing? Does that get kind of like a New Orleans vibe a little bit when you write?
Yeah, there is a New Orleans vibe for sure. I think it does in almost in the same way, like with the fatherhood question, like in these weird subtle ways. But then I think back and I'm like, I remember I did a reading in New Orleans way before I moved there of one of my adult novels, Midnight Taxi Tango. And it was this scene where a bunch of people are cutting up in a playground and having a good time. And this ghost comes by and they have to fight it and all this stuff. And afterwards, there was a whole bunch of high school kids there. And they all came up to me and they were like, that was so New Orleans. And I was like, it's really Brooklyn. Like it's a super Brooklyn moment in a Brooklyn park from a writer who lives in Brooklyn. And they're like, no, that was New Orleans. And I was like, you know what? That's a great compliment. I will take it. I love it. It's amazing. So I feel like New Orleans has always been there. And I've always been kind of on my way to New Orleans on some level. And now I'm there and it's even more there. And yeah, if you read this book, you will feel New Orleans, I think, in the streets, even though it very much takes place in Brooklyn. And I don't know how to describe it except it's vibes. Yeah. Yeah, other questions? Yes.
So, can you tell us more about your Jewish background and how that wrapped in? And you said specifically Sephardic, right?
Yeah.
Fascinating.
Great question. So, yeah, I grew up Catholic and Jewish. We kind of started to veer more Jewish somewhere in there. We are more Ashkenazi, not Sephardic, but then there's the Spanish influence from the Cuban side, so it's all kind of interconnected. And that's exactly what I mean. Like, on levels, this is more me than any other book, but there's still lots of ways that it's not me, as not a Sephardic person. So I had never really dealt with a lot of Judaism in my books for whatever reason. It just didn't come up in the same way. And I was really excited to do that. So, the rabbi character is in here and he turned into one of the best characters in the book for me. And I just love his friendship with Matteo. And his kind of guidance throughout is certainly guided by some of my own experiences with Judaism and being bar mitzvah and everything else. But then I found an amazing rabbi to read it over, who's like an expert in Sephardic culture. And that brought whole new levels to it that just really expanded my understanding of things. So it was great. Yeah, thank you. Yeah. Other questions? Yes.
I'm Kenny.
Hey.
I had a chance to read the book, and one thing that I noticed within the first few chapters, I felt like I was in that world of
good.
Ballad and Dagger.
Yeah.
And I was kind of curious, how do you approach introducing readers to that new world, and instead of like a High Republic thing?
Yeah, thank you. It's hard. That's pretty much why it starts with a big party. And I think if you notice, like that's the best way to bring a lot of people together. Like you know how The Godfather, begins with a wedding and ends with a baptism and everyone gets murdered in the middle. Like that's such a ceremony is on the one hand, just it makes sense. Like ceremony is a way that we enter into cultures and understand them in some ways. And then it's also like there's insider, outsider things brought up with that. There's performance versus ritual. There's all these things that happen with gatherings. And so it's a perfect way to kind of get everybody on the page together. It's dangerous too, because it's so early on. And I was very conscious of throwing a lot of characters at readers so quickly. Which is really why we needed that kind of opening chapter to get them there first and get people a little bit in the world before we just was like, hey, and then there's Tolo, and then there's the rabbi, and then there's Jerval, like it all. So it's a lot. So it's always like, it's all in the balance of trying to figure out those things. It's like, how much do you tell them? What do you withhold? It's kind of information is a need to know only for the reader, but they need to know a lot early on. And that's the challenge of especially beginnings of books. But I'm glad to hear it worked out.
All right, I'm going to ask some of the virtual questions.
Yes.
I just have to say there are so many, so I apologize if I cannot ask all of them. This one here, though, has quite a bit of upvote, so I'm going to ask it first. Hello, Daniel, longtime listener, first-time chatter. I wanted to know what it's like to be the best-dressed author in the game at the moment, and how hard do you pop your collar, sir? That is from Omar.
Omar, literally, Omar, I want you to know that as he was reading the question, Tiffy's over here like, that's Omar. Omar. You rascal. I mean, what do I say to that? First of all, I'm sitting next to Tiffie Starchild. There's no way I'm better dressed than her. Absolutely not. You are a shining light. I just do my best. I got nice shoes.
There we go.
That's it.
The color of the shirt,
purple.
It's giving.
Or it's like a lavender, isn't it?
It's very no. It's a lilac.
It's a lilac.
Like a periwinkle.
It's a periwinkle.
It's periwinkle.
Yeah. Thanks, Omar.
This one comes from Tiffany. Hi, Daniel. How has your teaching experience? Oh, where'd it go? There we go. How's your teaching experience at WCFA shaped your writing and authorial voice as a whole?
I love teaching. It's one of my favorite things to do. And so I think it's almost corny, but like you do learn a lot.
Sorry, WCFA. I read that wrong.
Good.
I read that wrong.
Okay, I was like, did I teach somewhere and forget about it? I felt so bad. WCFA, that's Vermont College of Fine Arts, where I was an instructor for one semester, and it's a great program. You do really learn a lot teaching. Like it really just grows you as a person and as a writer to interact with young people or people of all ages who are learning. In part because they're at such a different place in the process that in the process of trying to kind of explain concepts to them and work them through process and different things like that, you clarify so much about your own process. And at the end of the day, I think I always tell people that the most important skill that a writer can have is self-reflection. That's what'll keep you from burning out or help you burn out less and, keep you on your toes. And that's what will make you a better writer and a better communicator, but also like have a deeper understanding of other people. And like, that's it. That's almost the whole game. It's like, if you can be self-reflective and understanding of other people's situations, that gets you so much further ahead as a writer, both in terms of process and product. Mm-hmm. And so being a teacher, like you have to be self-reflective. It's like a self-reflection boiling pot. Because if you're not, you'll see the class fall apart right in front of you. You have to be able to read the room, which is also a form of self-reflection, honestly, and see where people are at and what are the dynamics at play, what are the power dynamics at play. And you have to be able to articulate process in a way that makes sense to other people and resonates. So I just think all of that makes you a better writer.
Thank you, Tiffany, for that question. Next question comes from Michelle. You mentioned that you love music. Did you have a soundtrack musical mood for this book and for book one?
I did. And without it, I would have been lost because I was writing Star Wars simultaneously. And San Madrigal and the Galaxy Far, Far Away are very different. And so switching back and forth was one of the hardest parts, but also one of the most fun parts. Like I said, balance, right? So I needed that. I have a Spotify playlist, which I've been meaning to post, and I haven't yet, but I will.
That goes with this?
Yes.
Yes.
And it's dope. It's really good. I'm really proud of it. And it would snap me right into Little Madrigal or San Madrigal, wherever I needed to be, like, and it's music, of the different cultures that it talks about, from my research, from just random Googling and Spotifying and everything else. And then it's also just songs that get me hype in that particular way that I needed to be. But yeah, I swear by it. I feel like the advice is almost untried at this point to be like, yeah, when you're switching projects, playlists, but like playlists.
Okay.
Playlists. I'll post it. I keep saying that. I'm really going to post it.
I'm going to disrespectfully be on your head about it. Like I am.
Please do.
I'm a bully on
Please
Twitter.
do. Yeah, it's great. The world should have it. The streets need it. Well, yes, we have another audience question.
Yes, I have a question. So unfortunately I haven't read yet. I just picked it up today.
It just came out a week ago, so take your time.
It's fine. I like it so far. One, is this a series? And two, what was the reason, motivation for including like poems or segments from different works?
So it is a series. It's a duology. So the book 2 is done and on the way out next spring. I don't think we're allowed to tell the title yet, but there is a title even. And I can tell you about book 2 is that it starts literally like 2 seconds after book 1 ends. Bum, bum, bum. I can also tell you that it was a hard book to write, and it's rough on the characters in a good way, but in a, I went through it writing because they were going through it writing it, and I love these kids a lot. I genuinely care about them. So I was like, oh man, you guys gonna be all right. No spoilers. But there's also another POV in it, which is cool. So I can say that. As far as the poems, it's almost to the world building question earlier too. Like any opportunity that you have to world build, you take. And what I felt like with the poems is a way to talk about San Madrigal and its culture outside of the scope of the story, and just these little vignettes, like just a way to kind of build the vibes of the world that I couldn't do necessarily in the story. And it added kind of a sense of weight to certain themes that I was playing with. Makes sense. But yeah, thanks for the question.
Awesome question.
Yeah.
You get just seeing it in person, the cover is just probably like one of the best covers I've ever seen.
Man, thank you. I agree.
Were you like surprised by it? Did you help the artist a lot, or did you let them just go for it?
First of all, I agree with you. It's incredible. And I'm very spoiled by covers. I've always had amazing covers. And I've always fought for them. One thing I need y'all to know is that most of the time, the writer's experience of covers is that they just get given a cover. And they better hope it's good, especially with like Star Wars. Like, thank God Star Wars is amazing at covers, and I've had amazing Star Wars covers, but they're literally like, here's your cover group. Less so with the High Republic because I've been so involved with that, but in general, you just get your cover. With this, they were very cool about asking from the beginning. I actually made is it Pinterest or Pinterest?
Pinterest.
Social media expert. I made a Pinterest board way before we were even talking about the cover, just to have of vibes, like this is like of a lot of Sephardic stuff and Santeria stuff and Brooklyn stuff, all pirate stuff, all that. And I gave that to them, and I think that helped a lot. And then I gave them kind of what I wanted. I really wanted Chayla and Mateo to be on there because their relationship is really the heart of the book. And I wanted Brooklyn, and it's just so beautiful. They nailed it.
It's so good.
Yeah, it's perfect. Any more questions?
I have one last question here before we have to close it.
Sure.
What books or authors are you excited about right now?
There are so many. Tracy Dion is incredible with Legend Born and the new one on the way, Blood March, I think it's called. Claribel Ortega, has the Witchlings that just came out in the middle grade space. That's so awesome. Danielle Clayton just had a great book come out. There's so many good books. That's kind of the first ones that come to mind. But I also just love everything Lee Bardugo does. I don't know if you guys have read the Grisha verse, or Ninth House. Like, Lee Bardugo is just a genius. She was instrumental in this book too. Actually, we beta read for each other, and so she really helped me snap a lot of the character arcs into place. and she came up with the title. In fact, like partially because I kept bothering her, and I just didn't have a title for the longest. And I was just like, it's this, it's and I had the Google Doc with all the different word association games, and I tagged her into it, and she was like, and I kept throwing them at her. Like I would just text her weird hours, like, what about the Ballad of Saints and Outlaws, or whatever, all this shit. And then one day she just texted me, what about Ballad and Dagger? I was like, yes, that's it.
That's it.
Perfection. Good night. The game is over. She's amazing. So shout out to Lee Batugo.
All right. And I think with that, everyone, we're going to have to say goodnight. Thank you so much, Daniel. And thank you so much, Tiffie, for being here.
Thank you all for coming. Thanks for hosting us.
Thank you very much, Internet people, for being here. I'm going to go ahead and end the stream and beginning the in-store signing portion. Have a good night, everyone. Bye.